Hello, lovely people. Welcome to Ari Talks About Music. I'm Ari, and today I'll be reviewing the new Mitski album, Nothing's About to Happen to Me. Here we have the eighth album from the American singer-songwriter and multi-instrumentalist Mitski, and one that for me personally did come very anticipated, as she has been on an absolutely killer streak since 2014's Bury Me at Makeout Creek, having had very consistent and quality output since then and exploring quite a lot of different genres. Everything from slacker rock to indie rock to even dream pop, and she seems to be good at all of it, with pretty much every single one of her last few albums all having something interesting and unique to offer. And now, having listened to Nothing's About to Happen to Me a few times, I think that it's clear that this one is almost kind of just all of that put together, as this album doesn't commit quite as much to any particular genre like many of her other albums do, but instead chooses to mix a lot of the elements and influences that are on her previous albums and put them all together. And I think that because of that, there are definitely a lot of moments where this album does kind of feel just a little bit all over the place, as I do think there are quite a lot of moments where just the transitions or the genre blending do clash just a little bit, especially with this album having quite a few vibe changes just from going straight from slacker rock to something a lot more dreamy and chill, which in a lot of ways I do think that does help the album. I think this is absolutely one of, if not her most diverse so far, but a lot of the vibe switches can often feel quite abrupt. I think that the opening song, In a Lake, is actually a really strong start to the album, immediately going for the much calmer and simple Vogue sort of vibe, and I think that the very subtle use of an accordion on this track is a really interesting addition, and I think that that, coupled with the much more simple vocal and guitar style, actually gives this song quite a lot of depth. I think that this track's big climax towards the end could have been executed maybe just a little bit better. It just kind of comes out of nowhere and then goes as quickly as it arrives, and I feel like it just doesn't quite give the listener enough time to fully take it in. I think that Where's My Phone is just a really cool and fun slacker rock song that has a very bouncy kind of vibe to it, and that, along with the very fuzzy production style and melodic vocals, I think that this is definitely one of the most entertaining songs on the album. And I do just really love the progression of this song's loudness and chaos, which does just get more and more as it goes. Cats is genuinely a really beautiful and heartfelt track, and one that does feel very intimate, like you're actually there with her, as she does talk about a past relationship in a very sad way and chooses to take the perspective of what's going to happen to the cats. And she kind of uses that as a symbolism to represent one of the many aspects of how heartbreaking a breakup can be. And I think that the much more subtle and quiet instrumentation on this album really helps with that, as it definitely helps you focus a lot more on the lyrics and the vocals, which is generally much more the focal point of the song, and is a huge part of what makes it feel so much more personal and intimate. If I Leave has a pretty cool and very progressive intro, which, as much as I do like it, I think for the album's overall style, it doesn't fit in quite as well as I would like. It does do a fair bit of meandering before doing anything hugely interesting, which for an album that's as short and to the point as this one does kind of feel like it's just wasting a bit of time. However, I do find this to definitely be worth the wait, as when it does finally kick in, the passion in the vocals and everything else is absolutely incredible, and I think definitely does make for one of the most satisfying and euphoric moments that the album has. Dead Women is an absolutely incredible, very moody and atmospheric track, and considering how short it is for the kind of style it has, it does use its time very efficiently. I think that despite her very monotonous vocal style on this track, it actually does suit it very well, as this track is just a lot more atmosphere heavy and the soft vocals are just there to add another layer to that sound. And then the almost kind of orchestral style that it takes on for the climax of the song is absolutely amazing and really unexpected, and I think does deliver an absolutely brilliant moment on the album that just kind of comes out of nowhere but still works so well. I think that Instead of Here is just a nice little song, and one that definitely does reward you for listening to the whole thing, as I do find the first half of the track to be pretty uninteresting, but there is more and more to it the further you go on. I love how more and more layers just keep getting added to the song, giving it so much depth and an absolutely beautiful atmosphere, and then eventually coming through with arguably the best outro on the album, just being such a gorgeous moment. I'll Change For You is just a cute little song. I really love the very cozy vibe that it has. I also really like the slow progression, feeling very natural, and especially with a lot of the very subtle instruments that are used, like the piano and the wind instruments too. All of these just being some very small features, but they all come together to make this song definitely one of the best on the album in terms of its atmosphere. And the lyrics on this track too are very intimate and very heartfelt, and you really do feel her frustration as she's singing. Rules is sort of a fun track, although I think that the much more upbeat and bouncy vibe that this track has does kind of kill the album momentum just a little bit. Coming off a run of three much calmer and softer songs that are much more focused on atmosphere, I find this song to just kind of come out of nowhere and switch up the vibe in a way that just doesn't really work. And even then, the song itself does have some fun ideas, but I just don't think they were executed all that well, and the track as a whole I think ends up coming across quite repetitive without ever really doing anything to make it all that interesting. I absolutely love the much more more rock focus on That White Cat, with the much more prominent guitar on this track being something that I think the album as a whole just needs more of. I also think that on the lyrical side of things, this is quite a fun and witty track as well, as she talks about this cat that lives in her house and comes to visit her and chooses to take the perspective of seeing it as her entire life revolves around this cat, and everything that she does is to cater for it in some way, which I think that overall the general running theme of animals on this album is a quite unique perspective to take, and I think it definitely does make it quite interesting. Sharon's Oboe is just a really nice, much slower song that has a lot of unique features actually. Most notably, this song does use strings incredibly well, and I think that it's something that, while not being a huge focus on the song or even the album as a whole, it does work so well, and definitely make this one of the most noticeable and memorable features of the song. I don't think this track has all that much else that's hugely noteworthy, but it just overall has a nice vibe and atmosphere, even if it's not the most interesting compared to what else the album has to offer. And then I absolutely love the slacker rock vibes on Lightning, with this being just one of the noisiest and fuzziest tracks that the album has. And while it is one that really does make you wait before it fully kicks in, I think it's absolutely worth it, as I think it really is just such an incredible and really interesting moment when this track does go full slacker rock near the end. But again, I do find it to just be another one of those where I wish the sound were just explored a little bit more, as this track's climax does come and go very quickly and doesn't really give you a chance to fully comprehend what's going on, and then does just give the album as a whole quite an abrupt ending. So I think that while execution-wise this is definitely far from Mitski's best album, there are still a lot of cool ideas floating about, and I think that on this one it definitely sees her trying to blend genres more than she ever has before, and I think that's kind of part of the reason this album does feel a little bit messy. But I do think that just with a little bit more practice and refinement, that this could easily be something that she could master in the next few years, as she's still done an amazing job at all of the different genres in the past, but I think that putting them all together is kind of what's holding her back a little bit right now. But if just the general writing and performances and just her previous works are anything to go off, there's no reason that she can't get much better at this kind of style in the future. And so for now, this album will be getting a 7 out of 10 from me. Thank you so much for watching this review. Please be sure to listen to this album yourself and tell me your thoughts below. Please leave a like if you liked the video, and please leave a dislike if you didn't like the video, and remember to stay hydrated.